Nick Labinsky, Chief Executive Officer, Quality Champion, El Jefe Guapo to some. We are here to discuss a company very near and dear to both of our hearts. It's a company that's been around for over 3 decades, and there's a large amount of people that do not know about Premier Research Labs and our mission and our story and where we came from. And so would you be so kind to, for those that have never heard about Premier Research Labs and, our values as an organization and our mission as a company and, our vision as a company, would you be so kind to share that with those listening today?
Yeah, I think it's important we start with the origins of where all this began so we can understand how the mission, vision, purpose, and values fit into today and where we came from. So we're going to start with 35 years ago, Dr. Robert Marshall was poisoned by GMO tryptophan. If you go and look up GMO tryptophan poisoning, you can literally find this incident that literally killed hundreds of people, thousands of people were disabled because a company had processed a tryptophan and caused a dimer, which means basically a linkage of 2 tryptophans together, that was poisonous at 0.0001% levels. So this hurt quite a few people. In fact, it almost took down this whole industry. Dr. Marshall was a victim. He was taking this amino acid as essential amino acid because he was a marathon runner and a clinical nutritionist, so he was using this to recover. And he had told a friend of his to produce this because he wasn't producing at the time himself. And in that friend, if you will, decided to exchange it out for a different type of tryptophan not from the vendor that he specified. And that was unfortunately the one that was contaminated. So he was literally poisoned by this, but because he was a clinical nutritionist and he had just met his future wife, Dr. Linda Forbes, who's a doctor of Oriental medicine, a chiropractor, it was kind of the synergy between the two that saved his life. And basically what happened, and a little bit of divine intervention, was what actually caused him to continue on with the mission of producing great product. And he took the lawsuit from that incident and started PRL. And as you can imagine, as a tragedy like that, he took the values of quality without compromise, which was unheard of back then, because back then people were using excipients, people were doing things, it was pre-Duché. This is the Wild West, as what they used to call it, which you got to remember, it wasn't, GMPs weren't even put into place to 2009. We're talking about like late 80s, so pre-Duché. So you can imagine what this was back then. But he was ahead of his time, even back then, doing no excipients, clean label, which it wasn't until about 7 years ago, really clean label became a thing in this industry. People were looking for no excipients. So he was called a purinoid, which I thought was really funny. He's like, yeah, this is something they labeled me as. And I remember the conversation he gave me the first time he got an encapsulator. He said that they got in the machine, and the guy came in for training, and the company they bought it from. And they say, hey, show me where your talc is, show me where your magnesium stearate is, so we can mix some formulas and try the machine. Dr. Marshall and Dr. Forbes looked at them and said, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. We're not going to be using that. And he goes, well, you have to. You need to use these things to be able to run this on this machine. They said no. And literally the trainer walked out. So you can see the mentality back then. So he was a trailblazer for clean nutrition, even before it was really a thing. That being all said, he continued on this quality without compromise mission for years. And 16 years ago, I started myself at PRL as a microbiologist in the laboratory. So I graduated from UT, was going to go to med school, realized quickly that was my parents' dream, not necessarily mine. That being said, I went in there and was very blessed and privileged to have Dr. Marshall recognize something in me. I don't know what he saw, but some kind of talent, and he really kind of trained me up. Started in quality, went through product development, was 7 years as COO, and then became CEO last March. And in that journey, he sent me to around the world, to Sao Paulo, to basically Shanghai, to different areas of the world, basically to see what true quality is. Also, implement a system that pretty much is unmatched in this industry that I know of. What we do, less than 1% of the industry does. Why? I mean, look where he came from. Plus, my own personal experience in this journey. I can tell you right now, from when I was in quality, from back in, I started in 2009, 2012, we got 3,000 fingers in of turmeric. And this turmeric was actually painted with lead chromate, had 1,316 micrograms of lead. Give you perspective what that means, you're only allowed 5. So just think about that. And this was kind of commonplace back then, because what they found out in 2019 from Stanford University, basically that they found coming out of Bangladesh that there was painted turmeric, lead-painted turmeric. Mm-hmm. And they said they hadn't seen it anywhere else. Well, I saw it coming out of India back in 2012. So I knew there was things going around internet like for decades. Mm. And then it wasn't until 2023 that the government got involved, that for Indian government, because there were so many poisonings of turmeric, lead paint poisonings in turmeric around the world, that they wanted to find out what was going on, because that's where it's coming mostly out of, right, turmeric? Mm. And what they found is that the West had requested they would only buy it if it was a bright color. Mm. There's this misconception that bright color means health. Like if there's a lot of times you say, oh, it's really vibrant color, that must mean it's really high quality. Not necessarily. People caught on to that, and the West was only buying it because of that. So what they do, they put lead paint into it. And they've been doing that for decades. And if you weren't quality testing, working with a company that was doing heavy metals, you're getting lead paint in your turmeric. Mm-hmm. This was happening for decades. And I've seen this happen, like right now, I'm trying to bring awareness for aflatoxins. Mm-hmm. Something close to my heart, since I'm a microbiologist by training. I'm a little close to microorganisms, and this is coming from a mold. So a mold produces this toxin whenever it gets, whenever actually the mold grows. And, mold's everywhere. And for PRL, in a lot of the supplement industry, we're dealing with botanical material that comes from the ground, from the soil, mm-hmm. that there's mold there. So depending on the conditions and everything, if a mold grows, then you get aflatoxin. And I can tell you right now, there is no one in this industry that I know of testing all the botanicals for aflatoxin, every single one. Why I do that? Why do we do that? Because we've seen it, right? Mm-hmm. In turmeric, we've seen it in chase tree, cayenne, to the point we almost got rid of cayenne, mm-hmm. because we couldn't find anything that was actually clean. Luckily, we found some supply, and it's for interesting reasons. I talked about the turmeric, the cayenne pepper. Why is the cayenne so adulterated with aflatoxin? Well, talked to one of our Mexico vendors, and they told us that the traditional way to dry cayenne is to leave it on the bush, let it kind of dehydrate in the sun, kind of, depending on the moisture, depending if it rains, mold grows, but they would take that and then bottle that. So this has been happening for a very long time. So just because it's traditional use or traditionally a way to process it, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good way to process it. Mm-hmm. And bringing awareness of this, because aflatoxin is considered a poisonous carcinogen. It literally causes liver cancer. So we take a higher road by making sure we're doing testing, go beyond the traditional certificate analysis. Less than what we've been told by auditors, less than 1% of the industry is doing what we do. And I'm hoping with awareness that lifts the whole industry. Mm-hmm. But that all being said, the standards that we put in place, because we've been serving practitioners for over 35 years, and looking at the values of what this all means, we're having extraordinary quality, which is one pillar, that's one value we have, being extraordinary, because excellence is not enough. We have to go above and beyond. We're committed to exceeding everyone's expectations, right? Because to get extraordinary results, you need extraordinary materials. You need extraordinary protocols. You need extraordinary science. And so that's kind of a pillar that helps drive to give you the transformation, the other value of ours, to basically we're redefining wellness, that stop being a transactional, stop treating health as a transaction. A lot of people, they're looking, oh, I just need this temporarily. it should be foundationally, nutrition needs to be at the base of everything you do, right? You are what you eat. Your health is directly impacted by the nutrition that goes in your body, and your body's very powerful in healing itself if you give it the right tools, if you will. And you can have that transformation if you give it the right tools. And that's something that I want to make sure we instill into, our whole community, which is the last value pillar of what we stand on, because our community of like-minded individuals, and bring them together to show them what is the extraordinary science out there, the extraordinary ingredients, the pure ingredients, to help transform their patients or themselves, and that we bring, and then we show other people that this community even exists. Because the interesting thing about especially the practitioner industry is that a lot of the consumers have no idea the difference between a chiropractor, a naturopath, a dietitian, Ayurvedic medicine, a QA practitioner, one of our modalities. Why would you go to any of them? And you can ask just any of the consumers out there, they look at you deer in headlights. And the interesting thing is my wife's a nurse practitioner, and she tells me horror stories of consumers that come in and they spend $40,000 on testing because they're trying to search for the answer, because nobody's educated them, where to start. So they keep hopping. And one of my goals with the community aspect is to use that community to help educate the consumer at a level they've never been educated before, by letting them know what's the advantages and disadvantages of each modality, so you start at the right place. Not to say you won't spend money to find the right answer, because you have to do testing and all that, but maybe by starting the right place in terms of the right modality, the right knowledge set, if you will, you'll get to your answer quicker, which gives better health outcomes. We're beyond just nutrition, right? We are a company that looks at as a 360 approach to health. And there's a force, whatever you want to call it, driving beyond nutrition to make this company go forward. And this started with Dr. Marshall, and tell you a little bit about myself and what this piece of paper is right here that I'll go into in a little bit. But to talk about Dr. Marshall and that divine intervention, when he was sick, when he got poisoned, imagine yourself, you're helping hundreds, thousands of patients all the time heal, and he couldn't figure out how to heal himself. Imagine mentally what that does to you. And it was pretty draining, because he could not understand how to fix himself. And so eosinophilomyalgia is the condition this poisoning called. It was a condition specifically for this event. You can look that up, where it's weakening of the muscles. And so imagine a marathon runner. He was, in the prime of his life, and then he can barely get out of bed all of a sudden. And so he kind of gave up. He's like, I'm done. And he packed up his stuff, and he was in Southern California, and he had 2 kids from a previous marriage that he went and wrote notes to, that he was going to honestly live his last days on a beach somewhere. The beach was his happy place, and as is mine. And he went to he was going to go to church one last time on a Sunday before he decided to go to Mexico to drive and live his last days on a beach somewhere. And he went to church. After the service, he was walking out, and he all of a sudden heard Dr. Marshall, like somebody screaming his name. A big guy running towards him. And you got to remember, Dr. Marshall is from New York. So as a New Yorker, he told me, he's like, when anybody runs at you and screams your name in New York, he's like, you got to worry that you're about to get in a fight. Something's about to happen that's not good. So he was kind of, wasn't feeling good, and was prepared to do whatever he had to do. And this guy came, he's like, are you Dr. Marshall? And Dr. Marshall's like, yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's me. He goes, I got a message for you. I said, okay, that's kind of odd, right? And so he goes, let me tell you the message. The message is, I know you're struggling right now, but you have a lot of work still to do, and you need to keep going. That's the message. And he found this guy's name was Big John, too. I mean, imagine that. Big John telling you this, right? And he was just kind of floored, first of all, right? I mean, everything that's about to happen, he was literally about to leave, just went to service. And so he's like, okay. Turned around and went to the pastor to ask him. He's like, who's this guy? I'm like, this kind of crazy guy comes and tells me this. And he goes, that's Big John. And he's like, okay. It's like, he comes here every so often, and he tells people things. A lot of times they're true. And at that moment, he was like, there's something I need to do then. And he decided at that moment to go back, pick up those notes that he left for his kids, and to keep fighting. And with that moment, he, met Dr. Forbes. He was working with Dr. Forbes to heal him, and he built an amazing company to help heal millions of people, right, over the years through practitioners. And what's interesting, so this force, that divine intervention that played into that, we recently, a year ago, had to do a little bit of reorganization when I became CEO. I said last March, that's when I was given the opportunity. Unfortunately, we had to reorganize, and which meant that we had to reduce our workforce. We had to become more fiscally responsible. We had to get ourselves in a little trouble. And I had to make a decision, which is one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life. I've been in leadership for 16 years, and letting somebody go because of their technical or cultural difference is very business. I mean, that's just part of being a leader, period. Having let go of somebody because of something you did, and I say me, because I was leadership, because we weren't fiscally responsible, was absolutely horrible. And I really, one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my entire life. And so, for the week of it was actually almost a year ago, the end of this month, when this happened. That week, I have a cold plunge, and I use that at night kind of as a substitute for caffeine because it gives you that dopamine hit, and caffeine, if you drink it, don't get great sleep. But I used that at night, and then I spoke to Dr. Forbes, and who's the co-founder, and to figure out who's the 26 lives we had to make a decision on. And I kept going back and forth, because I'm changing somebody's life, not for the better, but because we had to make sure the company lives on because of a mistake we made. And that Wednesday, so this is a Friday, March 1st, that I had to make the decision by. That Wednesday, my mother calls me. And to give you a little bit about my mom, she has non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, she's 100 pounds, 5 foot, she does everything right. So it was very much, and she had been in clinical trials, and I convinced her to do a protocol using natural substances finally. And it had helped her quite a bit, but just imagine with patient compliance, everybody out there that's a practitioner can understand this, that it was hard to get her to do the protocol because it was quite a few products, right? But she had a genetic issue, and she had to do this, and she had called me that Wednesday, and she said, look at your email. And she sent me a test result. And she had taken all her blood work 6 months beforehand, and at that, literally just got into that week, and all her liver enzymes have been normalized. Now, it's a data point. It's anecdotal, right? Can't claim that it's cured her liver, but what it also showed is that all her other lab work was also within normal range now. Her blood sugar and everything that may have been a little bit out of range before. And so what that showed a little bit is that whole food nutrition, even if it's complementary to regular medicine, the side effects are positive rather than having some negative effect, right? Nature knows best. Right. And so that gave me the drive to really remember why I do what I do. Why did I get into this? Why did I not go to med school? Because I could have healed people over there. But I'm a true believer in whole food nutrition. I think it was constructed for us, if you will, to heal us if you give it the right tools, right? The transformation needs the tools, needs extraordinary tools. And so that helped get me through a short period of time because I continued to go over the list again, and then that Friday, I had to go in and I had butterflies. I hadn't had butterflies for a long time. I used to be in the hospitality industry, 16 years ago, basically. Bartended waiting tables through college. And when I started working at Purell, going back to that old job, when I had a passion and I found my passion, I got butterflies. I hadn't had that feeling in 16 years.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And I was like, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do this. And we do a kind of a laundry delivery service that they pick up the laundry and they fold it and bring it back on that Friday. And I brought it into my house, like I always do, before I go to work on Fridays. And there was a note, this note, that was left on there. Hadn't seen one before. This is the first time I've ever seen it. Got a note later from my wife that there's a note inside. This is the first time it was ever on the outside. And it's a note that tells you, thank you for your service. Please, give us a good rating. But there was something written on there that morning that helped push me through to know I'm going in the right direction. And it was actually, and I brought it with me. I kept it. Mm-hmm. And it's something that is near and dear. And I have this on my fridge, literally, in pictures. And I quote this, but it had a reference to Joshua 1:9. Be bold, be brave, be courageous. And that Bible verse is what got me through that day. And it was a little message that keep going because we're doing great things. Just like Big John said, you have great things to do. And so I carry on that vision that he did, and I feel the transformation, the community, the extraordinary values have always been there. We're just now able to speak it, I think, a little bit more clearly to our customers, to our practitioners, and there's much more to Purell than just nutrition in all aspects. And we want to be that one spot, that the trusted source for everything from your nutrition, your support from an emotional standpoint, spiritual standpoint, and also technology standpoint. And that's where we're going to get to.
Amen. And, it's such a blessing and such an honor to be part of an organization where we still feel that life force and that mission that catalyzed Dr. Marshall into his own journey. Yeah. And it's so empowering as an employee and to see other leaders and other employees take hold of that, and our customers too, and evolve with us, right? As a quality leader and as, somebody that's been exposed to this whole story and you've experienced it yourself, just as you talked about, how do you feel like you're making decisions in a different way than maybe other leaders in this industry to carry that torch that Dr. Marshall passed to you?
How is my experience a little bit different than the rest of maybe the other CEOs in this industry that also lead brands or supplement manufacturers? Honestly, I didn't know really what the difference was till recently, because I was told, I'm to my understanding, that I'm the only CEO that comes from quality, that runs a supplement manufacturer brand and healthcare practitioner kind of focused brands in this industry. Like I'm the only one, which blows my mind a little bit.
Right.
And it does give me a very different perspective because of my training through not only Dr. Marshall and what's true quality, but also the regulatory aspect of what I do. And it gives me a perspective to understand, when I look at the bottom line numbers, and I could see from other CEOs, they say, oh well, we need to cut, right? We gotta figure out how to be more fiscally responsible, more efficient. So we're gonna reduce budgets in certain areas that I don't think they'll have as big of an impact. And a lot of times, quality seems to be easily identified because you can always do less, right? My perspective has come from understanding what that truly means. What is the dollar, for every dollar I reduce, what is the impact on what you put in your mouth? Like, what do you eat? You got to remember this, what we do, people are eating, right? Because to be a supplement, you have to swallow. Like, it has to be consumed. If it's a, and this is the interesting, people think that IV bags or maybe supplements, even though they say glutathione. No, that's a drug, technically, by the definition. So everything we do here, almost like, and Dr. Marshall used to call it what we did foods, right? Because they're like blueberries and stuff like that. And it's like, it's food.
Yeah.
And their whole mission with the Nutrition Science Foundation to increase the nutrient density in the soil so our food has more nutrient density is amazing, right? And we wouldn't need supplements if we had really nutrient-dense food like we used to. And I love that mission. But what is the impact to the food supplement that you eat when we're like, hey, we got to cut 30% from quality? And that could be huge. That could mean the difference between testing for aflatoxin and not. That could mean the difference between having the right piece of equipment or substituting for something that's a little bit less accurate. And I can give you a couple of examples. You know, there is a I'm not saying it best practice, is going to be a common practice out there to use FTIR, which is a specific type of piece of equipment that looks at, you know, it's a spectrophotometer that looks at the wavelengths, to make it very simple, the wavelengths of a chromatogram of a product to give it identity. But there's inherent issues by doing that on a finished product that's complex. So if you have a single ingredient, maybe easier, more of a refined ingredient. You know, you got to remember botanicals, even though it might be one botanical, has thousands of phytochemicals. And the variation changes based on where it was grown, season, stress, all kinds of stuff, right? So just because it says one ingredient from a botanical standpoint could be, there's a lot in there. And it varies within the same batch. So if it's a pure single ingredient, maybe that's appropriate. But if it's, you know, a complex, especially like our formulas that have multiple components, you can't just use FTR to identify that everything is there in the right proportions. You got to do multiple tests. But if I say, hey, you got to cut 30%, they're going to go and do that one test, which means that you're going to have maybe less accuracy, less reproducibility in the product you make, which could lead to not optimal health outcomes for the patient. So understanding the impact of, hey, not approving a piece of equipment that they need to replace, and, you know, business has to continue, so they're going to find another solution. But that solution might be definitely a step down in the quality standards. And it really gives me that. And one of the things we do that, beyond just the aflatoxin testing I talked about earlier, we use the best minds in the industry. And that's, you know, beyond Dr. Marshall, I've worked with a lot of the great analytical labs out there, you know, everybody from Alchemist Labs at Elon Sudberg to James Neil Kababek at Flora Research Labs, and, you know, really learning from them. And one of the things I learned is using orthogonal testing, and that's doing multiple tests to answer a single endpoint. Basically, taking, for example, botanicals for ID, I do HPTLC, we do microscopy, we will incorporate other tests in there just to answer the identity aspect. And we look, because each one of the tests, even DNA testing, because each one of the tests have advantages and disadvantages. And I have a whole 45-minute presentation showing case studies where, you know, we saw the HPTLC, which is basically a fingerprint of the product, got active phytochemicals in there that make, you know, it what it is. It wasn't until we looked under the microscope that we saw, oh, it has starch or ground glass, literally ground glass in the product because it fell in. Or, you know, actually they added, it was a turmeric. It was, here another turmeric story. It was a turmeric that actually had colored starch added in. So they get smart, because even if you look under the microscope, it's hard to tell, because turmeric, a root, is made from starch. It is mostly starch, and they added starch with coloring, thinking they could spoof anybody doing these tests. But because we work with the best minds of the industry, they were able to identify that. And so you have to use these multiple techniques to really understand the true story of this botanical, because it's my belief that you need to have garbage in is garbage out. So we really spend a lot of time on that raw material to make sure it's the purest product that's out there, period. So back to the original question, you know, my perspective, not only from his training, but through the years, helps me ensure if I have to make a financial decision, that we don't lower the quality standards of that product, which lowers the extraordinary results that you expect from us.
100%. Talk to, the world, especially where we're at today. We're in a landscape that is constantly changing. You have AI, you have technology, you have, new techniques, new modalities, new ingredients with, synthetics, yep. Right? And the landscape for a health professional consumer, navigating this, it can be very overwhelming. As a quality champion and a leader and a thought leader in this space, what are 3 values that you think or you believe in for a consumer or a health professional to maybe have for themselves when they're choosing a product to really put their trust in around, their health journey? Is there anything that comes to mind?
3, and I think 3 values that any practitioner or consumer should really consider, or really the better question is 3 things they should ask themselves before they take any kind of supplement. One of the items I think they need to live by is that they have to understand is that you get what you pay for, first of all. So don't settle with your health, especially what you eat, because just, it can, a little thing like a dimer of tryptophan, something at 0.001%, or even aflatoxin, the levels I'm talking about are parts per billion. Mm-hmm. We're talking about very, very small amounts, can change the whole course of your life. So don't think just because it's like a little thing, hey, I'm taking 1 pill, I'm going to buy the cheapest item on there. Question why. Don't settle with your health, period. I think that's something that people should really look at. And, I understand there's people in different economic situations for sure, right? Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, they should also ask this question with their foods, right? And this translates across the board. The other, I think, value is, that whole food nutrition is really nature knows best. Mm-hmm. And question extraordinary claims. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I don't know, somebody important said that. And when you see claims of, hey, you'll lose 45 pounds in 3 days, and kind of stuff like that, and question it, and people, everybody is susceptible to these things, I think, and I have close relatives who've seen my presentation over and over again be scammed a little bit into getting, it was keto gummies or something of that nature that was on Shark Tank. Well, it was never on Shark Tank, so there's no such product. But these are individuals that maybe even trained up so that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and you got to do your homework. So I think it's important for people that with your own health, you need to do some research yourself, right? You can't always rely on what people tell you. And I encourage everybody, even from this conversation, go look everything I'm saying up, please, and challenge. And my whole goal with bringing awareness is to elevate the industry, because knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. It really is. Mm-hmm. Because the more you know, the more you question, you're going to ask those. And if they're not doing that, once the other brands see that, oh, well, we're losing business because we're not doing these things, well, hopefully they'll start doing those things. Mm-hmm. And and we'll just take the next step then. And I want to get them to this first step, this whole industry. So I think it's, not settling, asking the right questions, make sure that you always research yourself for the extraordinary claim that something makes when you take anything, mm-hmm. from food. You see something, that oranges, will let you run a half marathon. Maybe after a whole year of training, but it's not going to do it overnight. You got to understand the qualifications for making those claims and what it is. So I always encourage people to be very careful and their choices with especially supplements, because always remember that capsule, our capsules, and any other competitor that has a capsule or another company that has a capsule that's the same color, they look exactly the same. There's no, You can't tell if it has aflatoxin, heavy metals. There's an inherent amount of trust you put into the supplements you take every day. You're assuming that those even the C of A's they put out there are real, right? Mm-hmm. Because I could tell you what happened when right before GMPs came into basically enforcement. One of the big things that drove the industry, this was I believe 2008, was that, or actually I think it was more around 2009, right before complete GMPs were put into place or in the process of. It was that 60 minutes where that one multivitamin had 200 times the amount of selenium. So much selenium in this multivitamin that it was falling out of solution. And nobody questioned that. I think they filtered it through pantyhose. That's what I read. But what was happening, they were dry labbing. And what is dry labbing? Dry labbing is when you have a piece of equipment to actually analyze something, and you have a printer, and the only thing that's on is actually the printer, because it's printing the results you want to see. And that's how it was happening, and I know it still happens today, right? And so you gotta do your research, especially something that can literally, hopefully, change your health for the better. But you have to go down and dig yourself.
So true. We've talked around it, and we've talked to some big points that fit into our quality system.
Yeah.
Maybe for those that really don't understand what to look for in a quality system and what really defines our premier quality system, can you highlight certain attributes that really help us stand out from the pack? And for those, kind of to ask those better questions, like you alluded to as a consumer or health professional, what should they be looking for in a quality system that is at our standard? Yeah. Because we are leading the way in quality systems.
I want to say the first probably red flag you should always, and the questions you should ask yourself or be on the lookout for, red flags or just questions, period. First red flag to always, when you're working with a supplement manufacturer, or you're, especially if you're like doing the private label, I'm going to bring that up first. Ask your manufacturer if they're willing to basically share the batch records. Transparency, and the consumer can reach out to them and ask them for a C of A. And yes, what I just told you about dry labbing, that could happen. But first step is if they won't even provide a C of A, or if they won't even answer you, question that. Realize that that's a huge red flag, right? Transparency needs to be there at all levels. If you're a private label customer, ask your manufacturer for that C of A, for that batch record, because at the end of the day, it's your product technically. So there's a whole legal thing on there. But if they're not giving you that, being transparent with you, first red flag. Second, when you're buying a product, I always tell individuals, look at the bottle, look on the side. There should be a address on there, and usually either says manufactured by, manufactured for, distributed by. There's another one, but it should have an address, and that's a requirement. A lot of the fly-by-night companies, they won't put that on there. Why? Because they know they're making either counterfeit or they're doing something bad. So they're not going to put their address on there. You would think they would at least put something fake, but a lot of times they don't even put it at all. So if you don't see that, don't buy that. It's a huge red flag to not have it there. Also, looking at the front panel, if it doesn't say supplement, that's another red flag. That's a huge, having these are, and they're so simple, right? Mm-hmm. But if the team putting this together that's ensuring the quality of the product hasn't put those simple foundational items there, you got to wonder when you get to the complicated part of actually producing the product, because we're just talking about the label here. Mm-hmm. How's that translate, right? Usually it's not a good sign. Mm-hmm. And I think the communication aspect of the company, if they're willing to share, speak with you, work with you, if they don't answer the phone or respond to your outreaches to them, your outreach period, as a consumer, I would be very, very careful with that. You can also look at history, right? There's a lot of older brands. We've been in business for over 35 years. Some of these other brands are very new and always real. And I always say, if you can work with a manufacturer of a brand, like there's a lot of virtual brands. What does that mean? They're a company that uses a separate manufacturer to produce a product. This whole industry is run by mostly contract manufacturers. Not a problem. We have our brand. We actually do contract manufacturing too for practitioners as well. But many of these brands are just a marketing arm, and they have another manufacturer that does all these other brands as well. And when that one manufacturer doesn't have the ideal standards, they affect a lot of brands, right? Mm-hmm. And so I always say if you can work with the actual chef in the kitchen, which is the manufacturer itself like us, that's going to reduce your risks. Mm-hmm. Not to say these other brands that don't work with a contract manufacturer are low quality. Just saying that to mitigate your risks, working with an actual manufacturer is a good step forward. And ask the brand, and you can easily see sometimes if they're doing the right thing. On the label it says, distributed by, mm-hmm. or it says manufactured for. Mm. If it says manufactured by, they're most likely they are the actual manufacturers if they're doing it right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something big to also recognize. And I think those are the major first items that I would say to screen and to ask yourself before you take any product. And also look at the values of the company itself. If it doesn't align with you, I think that's always important to do that. If they're just, hey, we're the cheapest product, is that really what you want? Maybe it is, and so be it. But if you're really trying to transform yourself to live a healthier life, to have a better health span, if you will, rather than just longevity, right? Make sure those values align with you.
It's so cool to see consumers, health professionals, really the entire space kind of awaken to mm-hmm. start asking those questions. We've talked about transformation and the transformation Dr. Marshall had in his journey, and mm-hmm. you've had in becoming CEO, and Premier Research Labs itself as an organization is transforming and mm-hmm. evolving every day. It's one of the most exciting things to see and be a part of. When you look 5 years out, 10 years out, how do you see us as an organization transforming, and what is your vision for Premier Research Labs?
So I'm actually going to go way beyond that. I'm going to look at where we want to be. We want to be a 100-year company. Dr. Marshall, Dr. Forbes, and myself always talked about this company. My kids would work here. And it is a vision to establish the longevity of this company. And many of the initiatives that I started this year is really what Dr. Marshall began a long time ago, even from our pet line. When me and him used to talk about the German Shepherds we would get, and we wanted to do these things. So I'm actually kind of fulfilling a lot of the vision he had. But we want to set ourselves up for the longevity, and we want to be that. We want to educate the world, really, like I said, transform and redefine what wellness really means for individuals. A lot of times they think it's taking a vitamin D3 that's wellness. It's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. There's so much more of that there. And I can imagine ourselves having large events where we're bringing this community together, almost like a Burning Man. Yeah. And I jokingly say that, but I'm really serious of a community to transform yourself in a way to not only enlighten you from having more knowledge about nutrition, but other, especially practitioners, learning from each other. Because, we have all walks of life in terms of modalities, from chiropractors, naturopaths, and they have knowledge to share with each other, and bringing that community together to ultimately help other people to solve, just like the best thing in the world is, and why I believe most people are in this industry, at least the practitioner side, is to help others. Mm-hmm. To really, my mother, yes, she's very close. That's my mom, right? And so I'm expected to help her, right? But it's still a great feeling that it helped. The protocol for her liver, our neighbors have taken and all this and helped them, and that's the best feeling in the world. And there's also a reward in creation, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely, right? Creating something great, and definitely as a driver. But I see us coming together with being a one-stop shop kind of hub for technology, testing, that we vet to the ultimate standard of extraordinary. That when you come to us, that is the premier quality, that there's nothing higher than that. And whenever somebody maybe reaches where we're at, I'm going to take another step for it. We're going to innovate quality. And I don't think people talk about that too much. They're always saying they're going to innovate products. We're going to innovate quality. People like, well, Pandora's box, right? Yeah, Pandora's box. Aflatoxins was Pandora's box. I can tell you right now. We're seeing 400% increase in prevalence, and it causes a lot of back orders for us. But our practitioners and our consumers that buy us know if we're on back order, there's a good reason for it. It's usually because I couldn't find it, and I'm not gonna compromise our values because I need to make $1. Dr. Marshall said he would put himself out of business if he could because he really just wants to help people. But you have to have a prospering business to get more awareness, right? It takes money, unfortunately. Hopefully one day that's not the case, but we'll see when that comes. But, in 5 years, I hope we have a much larger community of awareness because a lot of people still don't know we even exist. And they start experiencing themselves, because that's the great thing about our products. When you experience, when you feel it, you can feel our products from Pure Nutrition. They're like, how does vitamin C do whatever it did? Some practitioners say, well, maybe you haven't had the highly bioavailable, pure vitamin C that we have. Whatever the case is, when you feel our products, and that's why Dr. Marshall says, it used to be his tagline, he said, you can feel it the first time you take it, because when you have real pure material, it doesn't have toxins in it, doesn't have these other things, doesn't have non-nutrition excipients, if you will, you see results. And that's why we have people with us for over 30 years. We have a 90% retention rate. Why? Why we have 15,000 reviews at 4.5. And a lot of people say, oh, that's not that many reviews. Well, we've been a little bit hidden. Now we're coming out to the spotlight, and I'm hoping that people can start experiencing this and we can help a lot more individuals, because that's what this is about. This is about doing what I help with my mother, with all these practitioners, and all the testimonials that are on our website right now. You can go look at helping more, showing them quality, and then raising the standards of this industry. And I'm hoping with this message that we can really raise this industry from the ground up. And there's a lot of change happening right now. So there's a great awakening that I'm very excited about. And I hope we can contribute in so many different ways.
We really are in the business of healing, and it's one of the most rewarding aspects of my job, and I would think you would align with this as well, is to hear the success stories and just, the awakenings and just the revelations that our practitioners and the clients that they serve have, and offering our line. If you'd be willing to share, I'd actually love to see in your own personal journey, in your own health journey, you've been with the company over 15 years, you've gone through the products, you've had the protocols. Talk to us a little bit about, your own healing journey, and because we're all healing. Absolutely. We're all on our own journey. Nobody's perfect. What's been kind of a focal point that, being here at Premier has helped you kind of grow into?
The Purell has, and when I say Purell, I mean there's so many different aspects that have changed my own life, to how I view the world, how I view whole food nutrition. As a microbiologist coming out of college, understanding energetics and that modality, it was initially hard to understand, right, for me. So very much a scientist coming out, and it took some time to really understand how it truly, what is QRA and what do we stand for, right? And really kind of helped me understand the transformative nature of who we are, the extraordinary materials that at the end of the day have a living force within it. Because once you process to a point, just like we're starting to understand, highly processed materials are not good for you. nature does it best. And so my personal journey has been, I've done so many different products, and each one of them have been geared to a lot of times what I see is needed for me personally. Tranquinol, I love Tranquinol, right? And the science that's evolving with the Spanish saffron on there and helping with mood. In 2020, there was a big event, right? And I feel that event had huge consequences for a lot of people's mental health. And, the journey I talked about earlier with this item, that, pre-2020, I've always had some spiritual aspect to me, but not really as deep. And in 2020, I really went into using meditation and using Cure and using our products like Tranquinol to help with the mental exhaustion that caused in 2020, right? I also had a 1 and 3-year-old, and my wife was in nurse practitioner school. And, I was COO, and then this happened, that event. And that was hard. That was probably one of the more difficult times, other than what happened in last year, what I had to deal with. And turning to the tools I had in my toolkit from Purell, from nutrition. I always take a Tranquinol. It's one of my favorites. Saffron is one of my favorite botanicals, if you will. Plus, I'm a little biased because I helped design that formula, so I have to say that. But turning to meditation led me down a spiritual journey, opened my mind to so many things, which actually led me back to religion, believe it or not, and being closer to God. And that changed my life. And Cure was almost the Sherpa, the conduit to help me get there too. It's very interconnected. There's an overlaying consciousness, I feel, which is, people call it the one, the other, like the ultimate being, the God, that overlays us all. And I do believe that. That is my true belief. And through the nutrition and through our practices and through our practitioners really kind of shaped me. And there's one podcast, actually, that really, Grace is one of our practitioners, one of our Cure diplomats. And I was given the privilege of being on one of her podcasts. And you go on there, just like we're here right now, ask me about quality, ask me about various other things, and we went a little bit of Cure too, but at the end of the day, the podcast was really focused on supporting nurses that take care of dementia patients. And personally, I have some experience because my uncle took care of my grandmother who had dementia. And I was the individual he would always call to tell me about what's happening. And I was kind of the shoulder he leaned on, right? And the difficulties of it's a full-time job. And so she really wanted to lean into that, which was to help to give a perspective to her listeners of how I dealt with it. Because even though it wasn't me taking care of it, I heard the stories. And, ultimately my uncle, he ended up taking his own life, which at the time when it all happened, really, of course I blame myself because the night that it happened, I didn't answer the phone. And because it was so difficult to hear it every time, negativity, right? And I blame myself for years, but, I had to give him the story of how I moved on to really understand that, he was ultimately going to that happen anyways, and I was there for so long to keep him, to support him, and to really look beyond that. Everything happens for a reason too, and I'm a true believer in that. Like everything, and there's some people think there's a master designer, and I do think that there is, but dealing with that, they really wanted to understand that, and that helped me understand that, as a representative of a supplement company right? We're way beyond that. They want. I was helping them on an emotional, supportive level, and so really kind of helped me see the 360 approach that that is the expectation of Purell that Dr. Marshall and Dr. Forbes set with founding this company, and it changed me to really understand what we really needed to do. I knew it, but I'd never experienced it like that, and and the responses and the feedback I got from that podcast and people asking questions, it was just amazing, and really helped me develop into where we need to take this company, that it really needs to be that company that sets the standards, that innovates quality, that innovates health solutions for everyone. And I'm always looking for the unique way to help myself, right? But also my children, right? I have now they're older, but they're still young, right? They're under 7, so I'm always like, we just came out with a Hawaiian red seasoning salt, right? Why did I do that? Why did I put a multivitamin into a salt? I needed to hide it from my children because it's like a negotiation every time I try to feed them any kind of vegetables. Well, which there might be great children out there that don't mind it, but I'm going to try to biohack and get into their diet so they can be there. And I know there's other parents just like me, and I'm there to find those innovations, products like that, with the quality to give them that health solution they need. So there's so many different ways that Purell has affected me from my mindset, my view of the world, how I want to help people, and personal satisfaction too. It really has been my transformation in my journey in life, and I want to take everybody with me.
The words that come to mind is quality is like a looking glass, and as you lean closer and closer in, you start asking more and more questions. And I do believe that everything that is presented in front of you is presented in front of you for a reason, just like what you echoed. And so maybe whoever's listening to this, it's their opportunity to go that next step, on their journey. And it could be through our formulas, through our philosophy, through our mission, through our community. There's so many different aspects. So Premier Research Labs, we've always been a practitioner-first organization. Built on the backs of Dr. Marshall and Dr. Linda Forbes, practitioners themselves, biohacking themselves. Dr. Marshall, a trailblazer in his own right. And their mission in this brand has always been centered around health professionals. Yeah. What are we doing today to strengthen that mission?
Yeah, no, what are we doing to help health practitioners? Well, health practitioners are at the core, our main customer, right? They're the ones that Dr. Marshall was a health practitioner himself. He's a clinical nutritionist. Dr. Forbes, Dr. Oriental Medicine, chiropractor. So they were trying to help patients since the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where we naturally began. And Dr. Marshall, he was about helping everyone. He still had a practice even when he was producing supplements, pretty much almost till he passed away in 2017. And I think it's important to know that practitioners will always be at the core of our main customer, period, our main conduit to health. Why? Because not only because that's where we began, but if you actually look at this industry and look at the data, and I'm referencing the MBJ data, you can look at what is the driver. Actually, if you look at what's growing in this industry, it's a $67 billion industry, $67+ billion industry, and growing every year. And the two channels that are growing the most are e-commerce, well, the rise of Amazon, and especially after 2020, right? People website, people shopping at home. It's health practitioners, and health practitioners are only actually around 10% or so of the industry. So it's actually one of the smaller portions of the whole, actually I think the smallest portion of the channels of this industry. But if you look at the data, the number one source for understanding what to do about their health span, not longevity, I'm talking about health span, meaning living a healthy life, is advice from practitioners. So if that's the case, they're literally the force driving the changes, the trends of this industry. And so, that we've always been there, but they're the ones setting the tone, setting the changes, innovating the changes, are practitioners themselves. And we're going to be there. We're always going to have them to support them. And we're coming up with, really kind of modernizing our whole platform. Dr. Marshall was an amazing man and, built this company on, awareness by him personally being the person going knocking on doors, going to Dr. Forbes is always telling me, go into the practitioner's office, tell them, just show them what true quality was and what Cure can do for them. And having a low-powered AM radio station. We didn't have a website like 6 years ago. So we're quickly trying to catch up from a technology side. And honestly, re-implementing a lot of the initiatives Dr. Marshall had outside of that, even when he was around. And we're going to be supporting the practitioners to make it easy for them to fulfill, to communicate with their patients. We're going to be partnering and working with technologies that can give you more of a personalized nutrition, like pill packs coming soon. We're there to help with, finding solutions to allow the practitioners stop working so much in the business aspect of, making sure the website and e-commerce by automating that for them so they can focus on healing, because that's why they're there. Some practitioners, they like the business aspect of it, but a lot of them don't like that part at all. No. And they want a solution, and I'm there to help them, for them to flourish, because that's going to help more people. So we're really kind of leaning in to help them, not only be the trust source of nutrition, technology, but also be the trust source to simplify their businesses and to help them grow their business so they can help more people. It's very much a cycle, right? So we're on a journey, and everything I'm saying is not an overnight thing. This is, we're making up for a lot of lost time. Just the perspective of we didn't have a website 6-7 years ago, so we're making up for a lot of lost time, and but we're quickly catching up. And I'm excited because we have a dream team at Purell. We have the best minds of the industry. I'm very blessed to have who we have here, including yourself, Will. And we're going to do great things. And the practitioners are coming with us, period, because they will be able to impact the greater population to help them. I always tell people, you can biohack yourself all day. Mm-hmm. If you want to experience a level of health you never experienced before, go to a practitioner. Yeah. And it will change you. Just like Grace changed me on that podcast, it will change you. And I encourage everyone to go to their practitioner. If you don't have one, call us up and we can refer you over to one.
Amen. That makes me want to go see my practitioner and just thank them for their own journey in my own life. Let's talk product a little bit. Okay. You've mentioned Tranquinol, but talk to us about your favorite 3 formulas and why.
So this is like the question what's my favorite product is such a hard question, because you have to understand I was the beginning of the product development department outside of Dr. Marshall, right, and Dr. Forbes. I was given that privilege. And so I've touched every formula, and a lot of them I helped create, co-create, or create myself. And it's like picking your favorite child, very much so. But I mentioned one earlier, Tranquinol. And what I love about Tranquinol is we actually had a previous version of Tranquinol. And this is actually part of that aflatoxin story. There was a material in there we had proprietarily made it was a magnolia extract that had a huge amount of aflatoxin. And long story short, I'm not going to mention who the vendor is. It took them 6 months to tell us where it came from. They wouldn't, we kind of knew, of course, there's only one place it could have, but they wouldn't respond to us. And then it tells you the mentality that's still like this today. They said, we're not going to produce this for you anymore, and you got to find somebody else. And literally dropped us because they didn't want to face the fact that there is a toxin in this product. That being said, we said, okay, we're going to go make our own. And so we went on a journey, and we made, I think, a product that, to me, is I'm pretty much, I take it every night. It's a great product not only for sleep, but also for daytime stress. Stress is the number one, I think, issue in this, well, at least in this nation and the world. Stress is, if you look at the data, is pretty much part of every kind of ailment that's out there. And it could be different types of stress. It could be financial, it could be health, it could be, everybody is stressed. And sleep, lack of sleep, I think 59% sleep less than six hours a night causes stress. So solving that stress problem helps you in so many different ways. So, and that product with the saffron, with mood support, has magnesium, malate, has the traditional herbs like passion flower, and also valerian root. It's a beautiful formula hitting many different pathways. So it's a staple. Yes, I helped design it. So yes, it's one of my favorites. The other one is our multivitamin. And people are like, what's so special about our multi? Well, it took us 5 years to really design this formula. I wanted to have a product 100% non-synthetic, but also be sustainable and to be more natural. What do you mean more natural? I mean, it's from plants. Well, a lot of the products out there are extracted out with harsh solvents, right, to make sure they get the material out, or they go through a very rigorous process, or a semi-synthetic process, or it's just synthetic, period, to get the values. But we worked and sourced, and we have a product that's 100% from plants, plus using more natural solvent systems where they're not using, the traditional solvent systems that are out there. They're using coconut sap, aloe vera juice, and enzymes to pull out the vitamins, so they're in more of a natural state, and you don't have the solvents in there. That's actually in a Hawaiian red seasoning salt, too. And so you get all the B vitamins at 100% RDA. You get minerals such as copper and selenium. You get also postbiotics in there. It has a trace mineral complex from plant-based, from humate, right? That's humic acid from ancient plants. And some immune herbs. This came out in 2020. So we were very much focusing on immune, still focusing on immune these days, right? So it has like garlic extract, a reishi of beta-glucans. It is the kitchen sink, but at dosages that actually make a difference. And it's a beautiful formula. Very hard to keep up with all these materials. As you can imagine, we're very selective. So, but we are solidifying our supply chain to make sure that's always stays in stock. And it's an amazing product and highly bioavailable. It's everything you ever want. If you need that one-stop shop, I always say take that with other things. And the other product I have to say is my favorite. I'm not going to do 3. I'm going to do 4. Actually, I can't even do 3. There's no way. The other one is Max B. I have to say, we've been fermenting our own product for over 20 years. And why do we ferment? Well, people started understanding the connection between the gut and every other part of every other system, just as of 10 or something years ago. I mean, they've been studying this for a long time, but understanding that we are what we eat, and we are the microbiome that we have, which our gut health directly affects everything from your mood to, even they're looking at links to Parkinson's, right? So using probiotics to ferment different nutrients, and our Max B is actually B vitamins, helps produce, first of all, postbiotics. And postbiotics are actually the metabolites that are produced by these probiotics that actually give a clinical effect. And that include organic acids. Acetic acid can help with, blood sugar. It can do a lot of things. I'm not saying that's what's a Max B, giving you an example, but produces different postbiotics, which is good for gut health. Also helps with breaking down the B vitamins into a more simpler form for bioavailability. And it's a very highly bioavailable liquid delivery system that we do this not only for B vitamins like that, we also do it for liver, gallbladder, different nutrients to make it easily absorbed and to give you, and it kind of pre-ferments what your intestines do anyways, with a specific proprietary probiotic that produces other bacteriocins that can actually get rid of C. diff. Like we've had in the laboratory, we've shown that it can actually inhibit C. diff, MRSA, other things like that are not beneficial to the humans, right? Not that's the application, but just telling you the power of the compounds produced. And so this is a very unique process that we have, and there's nothing like it. To this day, nobody has produced a Max B. And I'm telling you right now, try Max B, mix it with our fermented beets and a little bit of honey. Best pre-workout you ever had. Or just take a Max B by itself and put it in a water bottle and sip it all day, or just some people will drink it right from the bottle. Realize, that Max B does have some ethanol in it to stop the fermentation. So if you're intense enough to drink it right out of the bottle, go for it. I would say no, take more than 5 mils at a time. But it's an amazing product, and there's nothing like it out there. It's our #1 seller, and there's a good reason. We also have a fermented melatonin, absolutely awesome, great to pair with the Tranquinol. But if I had the other product I want to mention, the fourth one, and I mentioned a bunch of other ones, but the fourth one is our adaptogen, and which is very similar to our Adrenaline, but our adaptogen, what I love about it is the higher rhodiola extract, and rhodiola is an amazing plant, and this is rhodiola root extract. And in terms of rhodiola, has been studied for mental fatigue and to help with mental acuity whenever you're stressed. And I go back to the stress, right? Talked about Tranquinol and the protocols I have. So Max B in the morning with the multi. I'm taking Tranquinol at night before I go to bed, usually with some magnesium glycinate, and then adaptogen. And I have actually other products I do with it, but the adaptogen itself I'm taking to help my 5 o'clock reset. So at 5 o'clock, after I've been working all day, helping run a company, really supporting the staff in whatever way I try to move things out of y'all's way. I have to go home and be a dad, and I got to home and be a husband, and I still go work. And even if I go do a cold plunge at night, because I use that at night to help off instead of caffeine, right? Helps that dopamine hit without having to be up all night and have bad sleep. I also use the rhodiola, which also has Siberian ginseng, has cordyceps sinensis, it has maca in there, lots of different adaptogens, thus the name. But that rhodiola, if you take 6 capsules, will give you around 500 milligrams, which is the clinical dosage, to really reset your mind. And you'll get a relaxation, calming effect, but your mind will literally, the mental acuity will help with that. So mental fatigue. So that's my 5 o'clock to keep me going and to be the best dad, husband, innovator I possibly can throughout the night. And so that's kind of my, and there's so many more other protocols, but if I had to pick from my favorite kids from our line, those are pretty much the 4 that I would pick.
So you heard it here, folks, the Foundational Bundle by Nick Labinsky.